Good afternoon, and welcome to this session on choosing a topic for publication in accounting theory and practice. I am Sanjay Kallapur, editor in chief. So, this is a new journal which is started by the non-profit Forum for Indian Accounting Research. It is an open access journal, that is, anybody anywhere can read the articles published here. They are permanently open access. Our editors and the editorial board members come from top institutions in India as well as the rest of the world. Uh, our first issue was published in December of 2024. You can look it up. The second issue is also in progress. There is one issue, one paper already published in the second issue. So those will give you an idea of the kinds of papers that we publish. Okay, so let me start with a poll and ask about how many people are published in which kinds of journals so that I can tailor my talk. Okay, I see 17, 18 votes, lot more of you there. So please do vote. Okay, the poll has closed, I guess. About, no, the poll is still open. Okay. About 23 people voted, and the largest number was from the uh, B, which is good. I will show you some statistics as well. Okay. So, yeah, thank you for answering that question. This is an analysis that I have done using Scopus data. This is about publications by India-based authors, meaning at least one of the authors should have an Indian affiliation. And this is, I have divided it into two time periods, 2013 to 17 and 18 to 22. And these are in the Scopus journals that are have accounting or finance auditing in their title. Okay, so these are the accounting finance publications by India-based authors, where not all authors need to be India-based. Some could be, their co-authors could be abroad as well. Mm. And the good news is that the numbers are increasing. Okay, you can see that in each category, the numbers are increasing. The highest slope is in the B category. The number of B category publications from the previous 5-year period to the next 5-year period have increased the most. You can see that these numbers indicate how many of these papers relate to India versus how many do not relate to India. So those percentages are also increasing. So for example, in B journals, 65% of the papers published by Indians are on topics related to India. However, you will see that the numbers are small and not increasing very much in the top journals. So that is the need for the journal Accounting Theory and Practice. India-based scholars are increasing their research output. The percentage of India-related papers by them is also increasing, but higher the journal rating, lower the percentage of India-related papers being published by India-based authors. And in the very top journals, the percentage is less than 50%. Our best scholars do more research for other countries than for our own. And the obvious reason, which I'm sure you all relate to, is that that is what the top journals publish. So there is a strong need for a top tier journal focusing on India, and accounting theory and practice is meant to fill that gap. So the topics of interest to accounting theory and practice is broadly the same as in the other top journals. Uh, why? Because firstly, the world economies are converging now. Example, Basel norms are followed in many countries. The issues are similar. For example, expected credit loss accounting for banks is coming into being in different countries. And broadly, the issues are similar in advanced countries and in developing countries. And most importantly, the theories and findings in one jurisdiction are relevant to others. Academia is not balkanized. However, the nuances do differ. Institutional features have some subtle differences. So, for example, in India, you might be aware that non-banking finance companies follow expected credit loss accounting, but banks do not yet follow. Reserve Bank has not required banks to follow expected credit loss accounting. Then some institutional arrangements differ. For example, business groups don't exist in the USA. They are a big part of the economy in India. The data availability differs. So, for example, Indian companies present standalone as well as consolidated financial statements, whereas in the US or in other countries, they just present consolidated financial statements. And some regulations differ. So, for example, in 2017, SEBI made a rule regarding disclosure of unaccepted ratings. So, when a rating agency like CRISIL, CARE, INDARE, etc., when a issuer goes to them for a rating, and suppose they reject the rating, then the SEBI rule makes it mandatory that CRISIL or whoever is the rating agency still has to publish that rating. That's not the case anywhere else in the world. Many other countries or European Union and USA have both mm, wanted to issue such a rule, but SEBI went ahead and issued such a rule. So these nuances differ. And foreign journals are not interested in India for its own sake. Hence the need for accounting theory and practice. Now, in some cases, we can publish these papers abroad because using Indian data, we can answer some question that is of interest to them. So, for example, my colleague and a co-editor of ATP has his paper is coming out in Contemporary Accounting Research, where he compares whether standalone and consolidated, when both numbers are presented, whether they have any incremental information content or not. And this same editor, Hariom Manchiraju, also has a paper that has been published in the Journal of Accounting and Economics, about this SEBI rule, and I am a co-author on that second paper. So the point is that the topics of interest are mostly the same as in the other top journals. Therefore, one way to look at what topics would be of interest to accounting theory and practice would be to look at what is being published in the top journals. Okay. So here is a word cloud of keywords of India related papers published in the accounting and finance journals, AA star, the better, the highest quality, over a 10-year period. Okay, so the color indicates how often they have been cited. Red means more citations, blue is fewer citations. So you can see that the large topics are banking, corporate governance, CSR, emerging markets, business groups, etc. Um, and so, these are the topics that would be of interest to accounting theory and practice as well. However, you will also see that on the previous page, there are several topics which would be of interest in India, but which have not been published there. So audit related, and I'm just going to give you a sampling. It's not that I have a comprehensive list of what topics are publishable that have not been published in the top journals, because the wisdom of the crowds, the wisdom of all of you is going to be much better than just my individual answer to this question. Mm. Okay, so audit related in India, there are so many issues like auditor rotation, joint audits. In India, every company must be audited, whereas that's not true in the Europe, that's not true in the US or in UK, where the smallest companies are exempted from the requirement to get themselves audited. Mm. Others, things like executive compensation would is also something that I didn't see on the previous slide. So, so it's not that the topics on the previous slide are the only ones that would be of interest. All topics to accounting theory and practice, all topics that are relevant to India would be of interest. And you can use the papers published in the other top journals as an indication, but do not restrict yourself to those topics because there are so many others that are waiting to be researched in India. So what makes a paper publishable? Answer is ATP publishes the same quality papers as are published in the other top journals. Our difference lies in our focus. We focus on India and emerging markets, and we don't compromise on quality in order to do so. So the answer to the question of what makes a paper publishable in ATP is whatever makes it publishable in top journals. So then the question is, what makes a paper publishable in top journals? Top journals seek research that provides insight. Okay, so you might have heard of this spectrum from data to information to insight. The word insight is somewhat cheapened these days. Any written piece of work, people will often call it as insight. But this is what we mean by insight. Insight means you gain an accurate and deep understanding of something. So then, of course, the question arises, what creates insight? How to generate insight? So I'll give you some hints. Firstly, if the topic is overly broad, then it may not be possible to generate insight on that topic. So if you ask yourself the question of what determines foreign direct investment, then it may be difficult to answer that question, certainly in the space of a single journal article. But if you take a small piece of that question, like what is the effect of Ind AS on foreign direct investment and foreign portfolio investment, it has some bearing on the bigger question, but it doesn't, seek to answer the bigger question in its entirety. It takes a small piece of that question to produce insight on that small piece. Okay. Now, people often think that descriptive evidence cannot be insightful, and that's not true. Here I have examples from the Journal of Accounting Research, one of the top journals. If there is very little information on an issue, descriptive research can be quite insightful. So here is a paper published in 2020 on the use and efficacy of internal whistleblower systems. Another paper in the same year, paper versus practice, and it's in the same journal as well, Journal of Accounting Research. Paper versus practice, a field investigation of integrity hotlines. So these authors went about calling various companies and trying to report an issue to their integrity hotline. So they had, of course, taken their university's permission and ethics board permission, etc. They had made up those issues, and they record how responsive the company was, whether they were encouraging of wanting to know more about it, or were they not wanting to know more about it and saying, no, no, we can't act on it, something like that. So, I mean, these are important issues, and there is very little that is known about how these function. So, descriptive evidence can very well be insightful. Mm. So, if you want to produce insight through descriptive evidence, you have to identify an important enough issue, and of course it has there has to be a gap in the literature, of course, that is, that question has not to have been answered before, and you have to be thorough in gathering the data. However, surveying, let's say, just as an example, surveying accounting students on Ind AS is not insightful about accounting quality. Why? Firstly, the data is not relevant to the question. What accounting students think does not mean that that is what the accounting quality really is. And in general, with survey evidence, there is the issue that people's actions may differ from the intent expressed in the survey. However, that doesn't mean survey evidence can never be insightful. Even survey evidence can be insightful if it is tailored to the right question. So here is a prominent example published in 2013 by Shiva Rajgopal and his colleagues. This paper has been cited more than 1,500 times. It goes and asks CFOs what they think about earnings quality, how do they think about the issue, and would they try to manipulate financial statements if they have to pay more taxes, etc. It asks questions such as that. There is so much literature on earnings quality, but there was very little that was known about how the people who are actually producing the earnings think about those issues. Okay, so that is what made this paper very insightful, cited more than 1500 times. So if you want to um, produce such an insightful paper, you need to know the literature very thoroughly. And more generally, think about how your work will change the priors of academics or practitioners. Those are the audiences that we target in accounting theory and practice. And one way to think about it is, are they likely to cite your work? If they are, then it is likely to be insightful. Or at least that is one step to finding a topic where you can produce insight. What about replications of studies done in other countries? Okay, the answer depends. It depends whether the findings of your the findings of the replication study are non-obvious or not. If a study has been done in hundreds of countries and everywhere it has been found that uh, earnings reports move stock prices, mm, then and doing it again in India is like unlikely to be of interest, unlikely to be insightful. Mm, So, at a minimum, if you are doing a replication of something that has been done in another country, you should mention why one might ex ante expect the results to in India to differ from those that have been found in other countries. And then do some, and at least, then give us a comparison after you have done the study. Give us a comparison about whether the results do differ, results do not differ, etc. Mm, okay. And preferably also do some tests around those differences. Okay. I see there are some questions, but I will wait to the end of my talk and I will leave enough time to answer the questions thereafter. So this is about replication of studies. Okay. Finally, causal inference. Okay. Again, sometimes it becomes a fetish. It is not always needed. Descriptive research is not about cause and effect. So obviously, you don't need causal inference when you are doing a descriptive study. Some studies are purely about association. So, for example, relation between accounting disclosure and future profits is not a causal question because accounting disclosures cannot cause future profits in the first place. If they could, every company would disclose the best and expect their profits to increase in the future. However, most questions are about cause-effect relationships. So do joint audits improve audit quality, for example? Okay. So there are some techniques for causal inference, such as difference in difference is the most common that you would know about. But they need to be used thoughtfully. It often becomes a formula, and formulas don't work in research. There is no formula for causal inference. Just because you have difference in difference does not mean you have causal inference. It is your job as a researcher to convince readers that the variation in your independent variable is exogenous. That is, it is like random. And indeed, there is no formula for research in the first place. It is your duty as an author to tell readers, and that's what referees and editors are trying to gauge you on. Um, why it is your job to tell them why your question is important, why your research design is appropriate for generating insight, and you have to explain, once you have found your results, you have to explain what is the insight that you got. Okay. um, Going on, mm, I have done, on the left side is the same word cloud from before. Now I am contrasting it with the word cloud on the right, which is the same thing but published in B or C journals. Okay, so one thing immediately you can see is that the words to the left are more red, the words to the right are more blue. That's obvious. Papers in top tier journals get cited more. Okay. Then several of the major topics in the on the left hand side are also there on the right hand side. But I want to draw attention to a few. So one, for example, regression is big on the right hand side. Event study is another thing that is found on the right hand side. Granger causality, data envelopment analysis. So the point I am making is that sophisticated technique does not equal insight. So authors of top tier journal papers focus on issues. They don't focus so much on methods. Okay. So then how to identify these good questions on which you are able to produce insight? First important thing, start with issues, not techniques. How to identify issues? One way is go to the websites of these regulators. Several of them have exposure drafts and requests for comments. So clearly they are interested in knowing research-based answers to those questions. Mm, However, not every question that is mentioned there is researchable, because you have to be able to infer causality. Then the question should be such that it should be possible to generate insight on that question. So there are other ways to identify issues is read newspapers, talk to industry practitioners, etc. Ultimately, our research is meant to be of use to practice and to policymakers. Then, having identified a potentially researchable issue that is of interest to the relevant audience, having gathered some data that is relevant to that, done some analysis, then you might think that, okay, this finding is insightful. Talk to senior academicians to validate your judgment. Okay, so that's the importance of going to conferences, meeting people, um, inviting these people for seminars at your institution, and so on. Mm. Okay. So we, for example, at ATP, sponsor one such conference. It is now going to be called the Rutgers ATP India Accounting and Finance Symposium. It has been going on since 2017. It used to be called JAF ATP India Symposium. The next conference in January 2026 is being hosted by IIM Bangalore. An announcement will be out on SSRN shortly. Mm, Now, there is a small fee to attend the conference, but let me tell you, we at ATP do not get any of that money. That money goes only to the hosting institution to cover part of their expenses. So when you talk to, however you meet these senior scholars, when you talk to them, when you ask them, is this is my finding, is it of interest? Usually they will ask you, what is your story? Okay. So what do they mean by story? What is the meaning of a research story? So the story has these elements. Firstly, what is the broad question which has not been completely answered in the literature? What is the specific gap in knowledge in that literature? Okay, so that is what gives you your motivation and literature review section of your papers. It need not be a separate section. It can be in the introduction. Sometimes literature review is a separate section. There is no rule as to whether it should be separate or not. And so just as a example, does it matter whether an accounting number is disclosed in footnotes or recognized in the body of the financial statements? Is a broad question. There are some papers that answer this question, but they don't provide a complete answer. Okay. Then, having identified a question, what is your strategy for filling that gap in a convincing way? Okay, so which setting are you going to test that in? There could be many such things. There could be many places which might be recognized in the footnotes versus recognized on the body of the financial statements. Fair values is one prominent example. Lease liabilities is another. Okay, so choose one particular setting in which to test that. Then how do you choose that setting? It should be convenient for research. Data is available, and then you should have a strategy for causal inference. That is, how do you ensure that the variation in the independent variable is exogenous? That is, it is like random. Okay. And in this particular example, the variation in the independent variable is whether the thing is recognized in the footnotes or on the body of the financial statements. That choice has to be exogenous. Okay, then, of course, the story will have the results and the inference from those results. And finally, what makes it a story is that there is a conclusion which links back to where we all started with, which is the broad question. Okay, so it has to give us a specific answer that has to have some relevance to the broad question. You're not going to exhaust the broad question. There are broad questions like these will continue to be done in many, many, many studies. It is only cumulatively all those studies that produce insight. But your piece has to add something to that mix. And you have to tell us what it has added to that mix, to that mix of literature that already exists out there. Okay. So the word story might make it sound like it is low quality, it is not research, etc. But there are differences between research stories and journalism. The main difference is research papers connect deeply with the existing literature. Okay, so journalistic pieces that you read in newspapers or in magazines, they don't cite previous research, whereas academic papers do. Why is it an academic affectation? Is it a way for us to produce citations so that we can measure citations? No, it is so that your paper will connect with the other papers and enable readers to understand what insight has cumulatively been gleaned from this entire body of work. Then, second, research is more systematic in pursuing explanations. Okay, so researchers do not just conjecture explanations, they also test them out if possible. Mm. So those are the two biggest differences between the research story and a journalistic story. The two are, the word story is common, but there is a big difference between those. Okay. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that I and our other editors see in papers that are submitted to ATP? First, motivating the paper saying that it has not been done before. Yes, that's a good thing. Novelty is necessary. You can't publish something if the exact same thing has been done before, but it is not sufficient. Okay, so just because the particular study that you have done has not been done before does not mean that it is insightful. Okay. Then we see literature review sections that describe previous papers, but without telling us what is the gap in that literature, particularly the gap that you are going to fill, the gap that is related to the insight that you are going to generate. And every research piece builds on previous research. There is nothing new under the sun. Uh, so we need to understand, we as editors, and the referees will be looking for the same thing, need to understand what is the gap that your insight is able to fill in the literature. Then sometimes people will just say, okay, this is my question, this is the literature, this particular thing has not been done before. Now I'm going to test it by doing, let's say, ratio analysis for companies in the cement industry. Okay. You have to explain to us why you chose that particular sample. Mm. Otherwise, somebody will do cement industry, another person will do iron and steel industry, etc. As editors, we need to know how it provides insight. So, follow the practices in the literature. Now, in secondary research, in archival empirical research, we will generally look for you to have taken the entire prowess sample and just after and telling us which observations you deleted and why. Mm, in some cases samples are perfectly fine, uh, but you have to see what is being done in that literature in those particular kinds of papers that are being published in the top journals, and follow the practices in that literature. Another thing, is very, very important. Poor writing with grammatical or spelling errors or missing references, etc. You might think they are not fatal to a paper, but these are negative signals about the unobservable properties of the research. So, whenever we describe some research findings, the reader has to place trust in us that we have done the analysis with the due amount of care. Now, if they see sloppiness in some part of our paper, they will say, how can I be sure that he or she has not been sloppy in the other parts of the paper that cannot be observed? Okay, so the grammatical or spelling errors or missing references, etc., are just not, just don't submit such papers. It signals your quality negatively. Um, and in fact, uh, unfortunately, papers being sent from India are starting to get a negative reputation because there are too many such sloppy pieces being submitted to the journals. Okay. So finally, why publish in accounting theory and practice? Firstly, we don't reject papers because they are about India. In fact, we welcome such papers. And if you can publish an India related paper in an FT50 journal or better, do so by all means. What at ATP we want to do is to make it less risky for you to work on those topics, because today people are not even trying to work on India related topics, because when the FT50 journals, the acceptance rate of India related papers is very low. Um, and therefore, if you don't publish it there, then you don't, it's not worthwhile to work on such topics. Okay. So work on such topics, try to publish them in the FT50 journals. If it doesn't go into those journals, do send it to accounting theory and practice, particularly if it doesn't go into those journals because it is about India. The quality expectation is the same as I told you before. Our focus on quality ensures that you will be among other high quality authors, and that reputation rubs off on you as well. Then third, if the paper shows promise, our editors will help the authors achieve the needed quality level. So when I was starting this journal, one of my mentors said, Sanjay, think of it this way. You were an editor of the accounting review. There, your job was to behave like an IPO underwriter. Okay, a lot of companies are coming for an IPO. The investment bank chooses only the best among them to take them public. So, a lot of papers are being sent to those journals. The editor's job is merely to select the best among them. Versus here, we want to be a venture capitalist. Mm, We want to identify topics. We want to help people. We want to, once we have invested in something by giving a revise and resubmit, then we want to help them reach that quality level. That's what venture capitalists do. Okay, so that's the difference. And finally, being open access, your paper will get wider circulation. Okay, so in summary, ATP is interested in high quality research that produces insight about accounting finance questions of relevance to India and other emerging markets. So once again, I will end by saying there is no formula or algorithm for research. So, my talk here has not been meant to tell you, okay, these are the topics, or this is the way to go about, and then you will get a publication in the ATP or in other top journals. But I have given you an approach, and ultimately the job of thinking, the job of writing well to motivate your paper, etc., is yours. And that is not going to go away. And that's a good thing, because if there was a formula for research, then we would not have jobs anymore. The LLMs would be doing research. Okay, so with that, I will open up to questions now. Can fintech and financial inclusion also be a part of diverse field of accounting? Yes, indeed, it can. Mm, it's We are going to be a little bit broad, so we are willing to stretch. mm, the definitions of accounting. Um, but yeah, this seems to be uh, within the broad area of accounting finance. No information in indexing and abstracting of the journal on the journal homepage. Okay, so these things take time. Mm, Um, but as you can see, it is published by a top publishing house, and the editorial board and the editors come from all the top schools. So it is only a question of time. And by the way, UGC has allowed um, individual institutions to decide their own journal lists. Okay, so you can help in this process by requesting your uh, schools to include this in your list. So the Manipal Academy of Higher Education, for example, has already announced that it will count publications in this journal. And in fact, they have said it will count as an A journal for their purposes. Okay, so, so it is over a period of time this will happen. Does the number of pages or words matter while framing a research story? Mm, Follow the practice of top journals in the field. Okay, so generally you will see that all papers in these top journals will have approximately the same amount of volume in the number of words, pages, etc. Follow the practices of the top journals.
But there's no limit, essentially. We don't limit these things, but best practice
Correct.
would mean that we follow in line with other top journals.
Correct. Thanks, Bethan, for clarifying. Yes, unlike some other journals, we don't say that there is a word limit of 3,000 words or 5,000 words, etc. But as editors, we will exercise our discretion, and if the paper is too long without enough insight, we will help you to cut it down. Do ATP accept qualitative papers? Yes, we do. Um, uh, Again, the standards for rigor are the same. You still have to produce insight. But yes, we are not limited in terms of mm, uh, the methodology to only quantitative methods. But by the way, it is harder to do rigorous research using qualitative methods. I don't mean to say that qualitative methods are not rigorous. What I mean to say is that to do a qualitative piece well takes greater skill than to do a quantitative piece, because there are markers, whereas in qualitative research it is harder. How the qualitative research can be incorporated with accounting domains, who will then be suitable respondents? I didn't quite understand this question exactly. Okay, so uh, one of the papers that I mentioned in my talk was about, it was a qualitative field research. Okay, so these authors, as I told that author, it was a single authored paper. He made a call to the integrity hotline of each of those 200 or so companies that he had chosen. And then he recorded what he heard in terms of that protocol that he had devised. Uh, okay, so this is a qualitative piece in the sense that it's not it's not even a survey question. Okay, a survey research can be quantitative. Um, so who will then be suitable respondents? If you are talking about who will be the subjects who will be responding to that, you will go talk to the practitioners. And you can look up, there are other qualitative pieces in accounting. One qualitative piece is about how auditors make judgments about highly judgmental issues such as uh, auditing fair value estimates. So, okay. What's the minimum number of words or maximum words for publication? Okay. Again, as I said, look up the other top journals. But one benchmark is if you are writing a paper using a, a 12-point font and uh, double spaced, then one benchmark that is used at accounting review is that your total text has to be no more than 30 pages, and along with the tables, etc., it has to add up to no more than 50 pages. Okay, so that's the benchmark for top papers in accounting finance. Okay. Question: do we have to keep the language intentionally tough? Uh, so, um, the best papers are very easy to read. Okay, so it is a myth to think that academic papers are made intentionally tough. And it is a myth to think that if you use difficult language, people will be impressed with the quality of your work. That's not true. Mm, uh, and if you read the best papers, mm, uh, my own advisor is Robert Kaplan, who is famous for the balanced scorecard. He is an excellent writer. Okay, so he would edit and again re-edit and edit again several times, and make it as easy to read as possible. That's what I have learned as well. Mm. How much important the endogeneity analysis in accounting studies? Okay, so think about it this way. You need to produce insight. If your question is a policy question, for example, like will mandating joint audits improve the quality of financial statements? Mm, okay, that is a causal question. So you need causal analysis, you need causal inference, which means you can't have a research design that is affected by endogeneity. Okay. On the other hand, I gave you examples of questions that were not causal in nature. There is no question of endogeneity there. Okay, whatever CFOs think about accounting quality is what they think. Okay, it's not endogenous. If that is the question that everybody agrees is important to answer, and that was the paper that was published in Journal of Accounting and Economics, then uh, it's not an issue for such studies. uh, in the first place. Okay, so your research method has to be adequate to the research question from the point of view of producing insight. Mm, As I told you, some particularly smaller journals will make a fetish of causality. And also, some of them don't realize that just because you have a difference in difference does not mean it is necessarily, you have good causal inference. Okay, so yes, endogeneity analysis is very important, but there is no formula for getting over endogeneity. So you have to reason your way through. And one part of reasoning your way through is determining whether you need to have causal inference in the first place. Uh, Investment and stock valuation, including case studies. Okay. Valuation is very much an accounting topic. So, you will see valuation studies in many this thing. But we don't publish teaching cases. We publish academic research. Okay. So research papers, yes, there has to be a research question, and whether investment and stock valuation is not by itself. I mean, it is very much an accounting question. Mm, Um, but if they are teaching cases, then no. Is it recommended to add foreign authors in the paper? Uh, Absolutely not. We are looking for good papers. We want, who will produce India related research. Ultimately, we have to do our own research. We can't rely on foreign authors to help us, whether those foreign authors are of Indian origin or not. Okay. So ultimately, that's what we want. Now, we will look at the topic of the paper. We will look at the quality of the paper. We will not having a foreign author does not disqualify, nor does it help the chances of a, um, a paper or our journal. um, I will say one thing, however, and this was true when I was editor of the Accounting Review. This was a while back. It was 2008 to 2011. Mm, I was the first person from outside North America to be an editor of the Accounting Review. Okay, so most papers that were coming from outside of America would be sent to me. And of course, I got papers from America as well. I could, in those days, easily make out which was which, okay, because of the quality of the papers. So if you need to add foreign authors because you are still learning the ropes and because they are of higher quality and you want to learn from them, do it by all means. So that's what I told you, get hold of senior scholars to be your mentors. Whether they are from India, they are from abroad, doesn't matter. Learn from them. Okay, but no, we don't look for foreign authors and we don't choose papers on that basis at all. A note, rebuttal, commentary, etc. Um, uh, Not really. So sometimes we will accept commentary. Like in the first issue, you will see that we have a commentary by S.P. Kothari, and we have another piece of commentary by U.K. Sinha, who was the SEBI chairman. Okay, so generally, commentary papers that we accept will have been invited. So somebody sending us a commentary paper is unlikely, because you need to be a person who is very senior in that field in order to write a commentary. Mm, uh, Emerging or underdeveloped markets are small enough. What is sufficient number of observations? 100 to 200, 250 firms. Okay, I have one paper that was published in the Accounting Review in 2003. It is about um, accounting for brand values. Okay. My sample size is 23. Why? Because that was the population. There were only so many firms that capitalized brands on their balance sheet, self-generated brands, which is what my research topic was about. So, the numbers are not going to matter. Of course, you higher the numbers, the better, more easy it is to get statistical significance. But you have to tell us why that sample is of interest. What is more valuable, empirical research or systematic literature review? Okay, we don't publish systematic literature reviews. Should a topic be more theory focused, practice focused, or a combination of both? Again, theory focused are going to be easier to do, because that's if you I mean, this goes back to the point about looking at what is being published in the top journals. So uh, uh, the practice focused papers are going to be harder. But again, you will see one example of such a paper that was published in our first issue by Dr. Mashaekar and Ajay Shah and Susan Thomas. Okay, it is both theory and practice focused. Mm, Uh, uh, but do one thing well. Be theory focused or be practice oriented. Just trying to combine the two for their own sake is not going to. So we look for the quality of insight. Okay, and for you to get a sense of what gets published in the top journals, you will find lot more examples of theory focused work. Therefore, that's the one to look at. Is it wise and practicable to share findings and idea of the article to the editorial team to get early insights? Honestly, we don't have time to do this. To if somebody says, "Is this topic going to be of interest?" It's hard for us to give an answer. Okay, so uh, do the paper, socialize it with your colleagues and with senior scholars before. Look at whether the topic is something that top accounting finance journals are interested in. And within those, if it is related to India or emerging markets, then we are interested in the paper. How ethical concerns can be clubbed with the topic of audit and assurance? Which aspect should be mainly covered for audience so that they read. Again, I mean, unless I know what insight is being generated by your paper, it is hard for me to answer in the abstract as to what ethical concerns mm, would be of interest to top journals. Is paper based on secondary data accepted? As you will see in accounting finance research in the top journals is primarily based on secondary data. It is financial statements are secondary data, stock prices are secondary data. Those are the bread and butter of financial and finance and accounting research. So it is the primary data that is rare. How many issues are planned in a year? So see, we'll take all the good papers that we get. Okay, so we have no limit in that sense. It's the quality that counts. Okay, there's a particular topic. Again, based on the topic, I can't answer the question because whether the paper will be of interest or not depends on the quality of the insight that is generated by your results. Okay, so so thank you very much. We can close our session now. I hope the session has been useful for you to plan out your research, have an approach to how you will go about selecting topics so that you can do more India related research and publish them in the best journals that you can, including accounting theory and practice. You will find that we are most receptive to those topics because foreign journals are not interested in India related topics for their own sake. They will take for India related topics. There is more and more of them being published, which is a good thing, but only if it generates insights into questions that are of interest to them. Okay, thank you very much. We can.
Thank you, Professor. That was really interesting.
Yes, thank you.